Let me get on here, if I can work. Here's some versions of this graph that we've seen a number of times during the conference so far. It exhibits a fundamental food balance to some extent. It has two components. One is kind of the long-term trends. The other, of course, is the short-term variability that we've seen over the last few years. You can all have your landing a man on the moon or microprocessors and microcomputers. By far, the greatest technological achievement of my lifetime has been the fact that the population has nearly tripled, and world food prices have declined steadily over the entire span of my life until just a few years ago. The fundamental question about food security is whether or not this a trend can be reversed and what the impacts of that trend is on food security. So let me start out with some definitions. The Millennium Development Goal, this is the global development goal. If you drive by Oz-8 here down the street, you see that they have the 8 Millennium Development Goals listed on their windows pictorially there. The definition that I'm working from is the one provided by the FAO in 2002. When all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. A recent study by the Royal Society, published last year, identified a number of the key drivers of food insecurity. I'll return to the issue of food security drivers in a couple of slides on. But of course, we're all familiar with what's going on with the food security equation, the world food balance equation to some extent. It's increasing population, increasing incomes, the desire for better diets. There's the issue of biofuels, how much food production is diverted to produce biofuels. Land and water scarcity and climate change, as we've heard quite a bit about also in the conference. I won't be touching very much on those issues, although they're vitally important, but I'm going to try and get down to some of these policy issues that we're concerned about and focus to some extent on the slowing of increases in agricultural productivity. There are several dimensions of food security. I'm emphasizing this fact a bit because I've heard it mentioned in somewhat different context within the course of the conference so far. The basic point that I'm trying to make is that food security is not the same as food self-sufficiency. Oftentimes, I believe people refer to the fact that you need to produce your own food in order to be food secure. I think we could just maybe look at Canberra and Queensland to show the fact that that's not true. Canberra, of course, doesn't produce its own food. It's not food self-sufficient, but it's quite food secure because it's linked to the rest of Australia. Queensland is a large food producer, but as the tragic events of the last few months have shown, it's not necessarily food secure. Weather events can intervene, other disruptions can intervene to turn an individual area from food security to food insecure, or food self-sufficient to not self-sufficient. And you have the global, national, local, and individual food security dimensions. The world does produce enough food if it were distributed equally. We've heard that many, many times. But there still are nearly 1 billion people in the world that are hungry. Okay? We're being told over and over that there will be 9 billion people on the planet within the next 40 years. We can monitor global food security by commodity prices, but our great fear, as I think Julian Alston pointed out very well yesterday, is that may be a lagging indicator, that some of the decisions that have been taken over the last 3 decades in terms of investing in agricultural research and productivity improvements may not have played out yet. We haven't observed that that's going to happen. And then I think Harvey Glick pointed out also that you need to continually invest in productivity improvements in the research pipeline because it takes so long for that pipeline to yield its benefits. In terms of national food security, again, it doesn't mean food self-sufficiency. You can be food secure and not food self-sufficient. It does depend vitally on domestic agricultural policy, but just as importantly on trade policy. individual trade policies of individual countries, trade policies of neighbors, trade policies of the immensely important agricultural exporters such as Australia. Free trade then in agriculture is immensely important. And then there are some other drivers, if you will, or some other policy issues that come to the front. And we think of local food security, infrastructure and social policies. Even if a country overall has a positive food balance, it can still have hungry people. And individual food security, of course, every country has hungry people, including the United States, so safety nets are needed. What is the situation on food insecurity? How common is it? Well, the good news is that the share of developing country population is undernourished fell from 20% to 16% between 1990 and 2007. There's a much higher rate of undernutrition in sub-Saharan Africa. What we see there is a level of nearly 25% food self-secured, food insecure or hunger, defined along one of the dimensions, which is the percent of the population that hasn't the minimum level of dietary energy consumption. Essentially, these are people that go to bed hungry every night. It's very hard to measure. These are just estimates. The estimates vary widely depending on which agency is doing the calculation. They're kind of modeling these hunger numbers. And again, food security is not food self-sufficiency. This is the kind of time series of that same indicator, number of undernourished people in the world. The previous graphs were percent of the world population, which we show is declining. But now the number of hungry people in the world actually has turned up very ominously over the last 15 years. Most food insecurity is chronic rather than emergency related. 92% by one estimate of deaths from malnutrition are from chronic hunger rather than famines or humanitarian emergencies. The undernourished population has increased by 9% since 1990, despite a 12% increase in global agricultural production per capita. Food production per capita in the world has gone up, but undernourished people has increased over time. Hunger also results from the global food supply demand volatility as we're seeing today and as we saw in 2008. The 2008 price spike was estimated to add something like 100 million people, depending on whose estimates you follow, to the chronically hunger. And the other thing that I would report is this is taken from a report that was just published a couple of months ago, and yet we know what has happened to food prices in 2011, so that downturn that was projected here just a couple of months ago probably has been reversed. So on to the drivers, if you will, the key policy drivers of food security. As we had mention of, and as I'll be discussing a bit on in the presentation, is that productivity, improvements in productivity is immensely important. A lot of that miracle of our generation of falling food prices against the world population increase is through the miracle of productivity improvement. Trade policies, and I emphasize that self-sufficiency here as a national goal or as a global goal, if each country tried to be self-sufficient, we would be in a very, very hungry world. Agricultural sector investment choices are immensely important. It's not just R&D and extension and education. There are infrastructural issues, and particularly as I turn to discuss sub-Saharan Africa. In the African context, it depends greatly on donors as well as governments, and there are some actions being taken by those groups in terms of the way they work together. Of course, international emergency food relief is very important. The World Food Program has had an immense role in addressing the issue of hunger in the world, but it's a very difficult tool to wield, and of course, it's much better to let kind of non-emergency food relief, non-emergency policy measures take the front. Once you get down a bit to the more individual level on food security, there are various types of income safety nets that can be implemented, the type of food for work programs, food distribution programs, income support programs. A lot of different things have been tried in countries. Some work very well, some don't work very well, but there's a lot more that could be done in that area to address that issue of a country that has a positive food balance but still has hunger. And then price stabilization. Lots of calls during these recent food spikes, the increased volatility that we saw in that first chart. A lot of calls for what can we do about stabilizing food prices, and a lot of proposals. The history of these types of measures has not really been very encouraging. Been tried in many places, and some people that I respect a great deal argue that in the end, they end up increasing the variability of prices as their sustainability gives way and they collapse. Taking on that productivity and agricultural production issue first, there is some good news. Growth in agricultural value added remains high in the developing world. Sub-Saharan Africa has led the way since 2000. That's surprising. It's remarkable, in fact. You look at all of these countries, you see agricultural GDP estimates above 2.5% per year throughout the 80s, 90s, and the current decade. Increasing in the case of Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Modest drop-offs in Asia and the Pacific. So again, looking at these figures, one set of estimates of an indicator of food production, of growth of the agricultural sector, the news doesn't appear too alarming. But I think Julian showed us this graph yesterday. Now I've known Julian for quite a while, and he's certainly a good fellow, but when he talks about this issue, I don't think he's kidding. I think he's quite serious, seriously alarmed. It scares me at times if this is true. That in fact, in 2 of the 3 major staple cereal crops in the world, you've had dramatic decreases in the rates of yield gains. Wheat, it's fallen by more than 2%. Rice by more than 1%. Maize a little bit less, but the caveat here, I believe, could be that if we think about what has happened to investment in maize research versus what's been happening to investments in wheat and rice research. Maize is a private sector activity. It's hybrid. It has intellectual property protection and strong incentives for the private sector to invest. And they have been investing like gangbusters in developing improved crop varieties. So some really quite alarming news. So what happens? What if, in fact, Julian and others are right, that the rate of productivity increase has slowed over the last decade? What if we're in a new lower period? What if we're outside of the Green Revolution remarkable period of increased food production? Well, this is based on a large model, a global computable general equilibrium model that tries to assess the consequences of a couple of scenarios. They assume a baseline level of total factor productivity improvement that is consistent with the scenario that Julian and others are projecting of the global slowdown. If that's correct, by 2050 we'll see an increase in farm output, but farm output prices, this is a basket of something like 32 commodities that they include in here in farm output, will more than double by 2050. Okay, again, that's not a very friendly scenario, if you will. But what if the rate of total factor productivity improvement in all of the world, in all of agriculture in the world, can be boosted by 1% from that baseline? The increase in food prices over that 40-year period falls to just 5%. Essentially, no real increase in food prices, a mere 5% increase, which is something like what we witness at times from year-to-year increases.